Oh, hang on. There it is. Meeting is now stream living on YouTube. There we go. Looks like it's working. Okay.
Yep, sorry about that short delay, members, but we're all ready to go. I'll just let Jim in. We'll cancel the longer, sorry. And Madam Mayor, we've got one apology from Councillor Shanks.
That's right. Yep. Okay. I think we're ready to rock and roll. Thanks, Sam, for getting the YouTube to work. I'd like to welcome everyone here this evening, in particular Mr. Alex Game and Mr. James Butterworth from Landscape, who are our consultants. Welcome, gentlemen, to our workshop this evening. I'd also like to just acknowledge that we meet on Kaurna land this evening. Kaurna land is the traditional lands for the Kaurna people, and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. And we also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Greater Adelaide region, and that the cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. So I'll just run through some of the general rules around workshops. So this workshop's been convened for the purposes of identifying and discussing the survey sent out to council members seeking feedback on opportunities to uplift the landscape of the town of Gawler, with a focus on to the town, and as well as some general improvements. This will inform the preparation of a draft Gawler beautification plan. This session will also brief council members on the project's history so far and the next steps involved. So this session is solely used for information sharing and not for the purpose of debating issues, building consensus positions, or otherwise discharging council's deliberative and decision-making functions. We don't have a set agenda and there's no minutes taken during this session. If there's anybody watching on YouTube, I'd like to formally welcome you as well. I don't think, Sam, there's any need to go into confidence. No, shaking his head. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to you, Sam, and you can walk us through this workshop. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, members, and apologies for that few minutes delay at the beginning while I work through the correct protocol. So in terms of tonight, well, this is a project that was, I suppose, the inspiration behind this was Councillor Goldstone in a conversation with myself pre-budget 1920 with respect to how we might progress beautification of the town. Based on the feedback that he'd received through campaigning, I'm sure you'd all received probably similar sorts of information through your journey. And it has been a topic of conversation over the years, certainly the years that I've been here at the town of Gawler, in terms of to varying degrees mainly around entry points. And I can talk you through some of that through the course of tonight. So there was a budget allocated. We've procured service of Landscape, and Alex Game is the director of that company. So Alex will give you a wave. And and Alex has done a significant body of work in terms of which he'll present tonight. And some of that's been certainly informed by the elected member surveys, which we received some responses, which we'll talk to tonight. But certainly the aim for tonight is really to have an open conversation with the council in regards to, what do they see as elements of beautification through their own perspectives, so that we can then sort of collate and synthesize that information in terms of presenting a draft plan back to elect the members in an upcoming IES committee meeting, and effectively look at opportunities to beautify our town, not only from a iconic entry statement perspective, but also a service levels perspective. So there's two aspects to this project. Service level provision, is it adequate? Is there some improvement required? Versus project level and upgrades. So to that point, Alex will talk to tonight to elements of the beautification project that he's working on. I'd also think it's timely that I provide members with a bit of an update on the link road, and it is a just-in-time update on some landscaping, because the link road and some of its connections to Cowsland Road, One Tree Hill Road, Potts Road, works along Maynooth Road are going to form some of these iconic, you know, and certainly have an impact on the towns from a beautification perspective. So it's, I will provide you with some updates in that regard, and there'll be a further report to council in the June council meeting in that regard. But there's some just-in-time information that's sort of landed, and I'd like to walk you through that as well. So on that basis, I'll hand over to Alex, and I'll get his presentation going.
Great, thanks, Sam. I'll just share my screen. Can everyone see my screen? Great. All right, so there's a fair bit to go through tonight, so we'll try and be relatively quick in our part, but feel free to jump in with questions and we can discuss as we go. So the project purpose, I mean, to expand on what Sam said, was really our first role was to assess the existing town entries and their current conditions. And this, I guess, as you've seen, we've identified 7 entries, or major entries. There are more minor ones, but these ones, for the purposes of this study, have been chosen. So we did a field survey. We had a look at service levels, what they actually look like, you know, what's the level of maintenance that's happening. And then we're comparing that to the current service levels as well. Then we're trying to get an understanding and exploration of what beautification is in respect to the entries and more broadly throughout the township. And that was really the idea of the survey, because to each person, beautification can mean different things. So it can mean greening to one person, it can mean less rubbish to another. And we really want to understand, I guess, how this relates to the service levels, because whether we think the service levels are lacking for some of the entries and they need to come up, or whether they're meeting the needs of what we want the town to look like. But I really want your feedback, especially those who haven't had time to fill in the survey, about what you think beautification means to the town of Gawler, and that's really important. And then we've reviewed some relevant case studies and examples of, I guess, beautified entries, and we have different examples. So whether that is ones that have been landscaped or just the general upkeep is sort of high. And then following that, we actually want to develop a beautification plan, which actually defines the service standards and defines the hierarchy of entries with a service standard. So I think that's really important, is that because you have so many entries, and this is what almost makes it so hard, is that you have kilometres and kilometres of entries in Gawler, as opposed to some of the other towns where it is down to 1 or 2 entries. So we really need to start talking about what are our major ones and how does this hierarchy work? And then we can look at identifying different service standards, and then also possible future capital upgrades. So these could be major projects like the artwork and landscaping that's happening on South Road. So working out where these projects happen. Now, as far as context, so we do have the 7 entries, and they're the main North Road South, which gets the most number of vehicles every day. So almost 10,000 vehicles every day. Red Bank's entrance, 9,600. Main North Road to the north, 8,600. The Ryde entrance, 7,800. Barossa Valley, 7,500. Carlton, which is a really big drop in number of vehicles, down to 3,300. And Riggs Hill entrance. That said, I think Carlton, that's where there's some big development around, and that might come up the number of vehicles. But this is really for the purposes of the beautification plan. This is sort of the context and scope study. So now I'll pass over to James and we'll quickly run through our field survey and what we've actually found.
Hi everyone. We'll just briefly go through each of the 7 entries, and essentially what we did is we went out there for a day and just sort of walked around and drove around all the entries, took a lot of photos, and just to get a bit of a feel for the current condition, service level that we could see from someone driving or walking by, and then you just generally assess the existing condition. So essentially what we've got then is a plan here which shows as well what areas are maintained by who. So the blue under the plan is maintained by DIPTI, and the pink or red areas are maintained by council. So you can see that, and you'll see through most of these, that primarily the maintenance is undertaken by DIPTI, and that's where hopefully this plan will be able to inform future discussions and that sort of, if, as Alex said, there are areas that you do wish to sort of increase the level of service, this will identify sort of who's undertaking it and how you can have those discussions. So it's also, if we go to this one in particular, this is the highest level of traffic. It's approximately 1,000 metres in terms of what you'll see as an entrance. So it is, as Alex mentioned, it's a really long section of road and does provide there, quite a varied entrance. It's primarily the Gawler Link Road underpass, which is what you see in some of these images, where you do get some sort of unmanaged vegetation and areas that are quite hard to maintain, where you can see along the banks of there that there are some weeds protruding through and some of those things. So generally the service level here is sort of dryland grass verges that are and sort of planting that's not necessarily structured.
And in general, we'd say it's probably poor, to be honest, because DIPTI maintains so much of it. I think it's a low level of maintenance, and hence I don't think it's a very attractive entry to the town of Gawler in its current scenario.
We also do mention as well that if we just scroll back, there is the new artwork, which is just sort of coming up from the south here. So in terms of, you do get quite a nice treatment further down, and then as you sort of enter and come into the underpass, it does decrease a little bit in terms of the maintenance stand and the level of infrastructure. The next one is Red Bank. So there's really two key entrances here, one coming off of Sturt Highway and one coming off from Malalar. Again, most of this area is maintained currently by DIPTI. So we do again have large areas of dryland grass that are really just slashed. And then again, some unstructured sort of tree planting along the road edges. There's also coming up from, it's quite an important connection for pedestrians and in particular students of Xavier, coming across the bridge and down. There's not a great deal of pedestrian infrastructure there, so it's not necessarily a great entrance for the students or parents or visitors. So that's, I think, a key opportunity in there. There's also probably one of the major aspects of this entrance in terms of there is quite a bit of infrastructure on the road edge. So you can see some of the electrical infrastructure here and quite a bit of signage, including the town of Gawler entrance signage. So there's a fair bit going on the road edge.
I guess visual clutter. And Red Banks, obviously you may have seen there is a design for the roundabout that has been put forward. So that would be a potential capital works upgrade that would happen to the roundabout itself. But there's still really big wide verges, which I guess are just rubble. And it's that big setback from the road to the actual, I guess, residential fence line, where you get this kind of no man's land. And I think that's part of the issue, that there's a lot of no man's land in these spaces.
The next one we'll move to is Magnus Road North. So again, quite wide dryland grass verges. There are really nice views over the township coming in off of Sturt Highway, which are, can again be sort of highlighted through some improvements. Again, it's one of the shorter sort of entrances, being about 250 metres, and there are opportunities for potential sort of signage and things or entrance markers into the township. It does decrease a little bit in terms of the maintenance standard as you sort of enter along Horrocks Highway. There's no curb, there's some open sort of stormwater infrastructure with culverts and things, and no footpaths for pedestrians to travel on as you move further down. There's also quite a large reserve, and those who sort of know the area, this is elevated, so you don't actually get much of a view of this space in here, which is maintained by council from the road. it is again also in blue, mainly maintained by Dipty, this area. This is just some of the imagery. So as you're approaching here, you know, this potentially has being an elevated little mound here, opportunity for some sort of gateway signage and just some general images of the road. Again, wide dryland grass verges and some unstructured planting. The next is the ride entrance. So again, quite long, and it does vary in character from more of an open rural character on the edge, and then coming into the township itself, more structured with street tree planting, some of which is quite well established, coming in over the overpass into the town of Gawler itself. It is a narrow road corridor through this section and maintained, well, there's obviously less maintenance required, particularly in this sort of Ride Street area. But again, it sort of has those same characteristics that we've been speaking about in terms of being similar dryland grass or rubble verges with, you know, unstructured mostly, or vegetation to the road edges. The Barossa Valley entrance will change in the future with the Concordia development happening within the Barossa Council area just north, as it's planned. Dipty maintain the road reserve only, and council currently maintain these areas in pink, including quite a wide rubble verge, which includes a new asphalt shared path. One of the main features of this entrance is this large, it really acts as a bit of a dryland grass reserve at the moment, and does hold water at times, and this sort of wider verge through here. There is also quite a lot of signage clutter, and most of which is not, well, there are some Dipty signs and danger signs, but there's also what we found is schools had just informal banners and things along this section, and some other sort of more informal signage that did just increase the clutter along that section. Carlton will be again changing in the future with the Gawler East Link Road and a new roundabout. It's essentially, there's not a great deal of vegetation along the corridor at the moment, but a very wide reserve to the north, which you can see in some of these images on the right hand side. So there is some established vegetation through there, which with increased maintenance could form quite a nice buffer and road corridor. And these are some of the works associated with the future link road. And again, it's the new development in here of Springwood Estate will dramatically change that sort of southern interface of the road in the future, which is similar to what you're seeing through here. And Riggs Hill is the longer section, and you could break it down into several different components. Again, it changes in character coming in from the south. It is much more of a rural character and quite pleasant really in terms of large established eucalypts on the road edge, and does then change with the new link road, so opportunities there, and then becomes much more sort of urban character. And there are some large reserves which are maintained by council in this pocket here and further up again, which are great opportunities for some more sort of nodal developments in the future, if that's something that we wish to have a look at. Again, you can see the character is much different to the other entries, particularly further south, and then you do get great views over the township through the valley and Dead Man's Pass. We'll move on now to the case studies, which Alex will run through.
Great, so the first one is the Tanunda Murray Street. Now, this one, I guess a few councillors have referenced this as well as a really nice entry, and you can see by the photos it's got a really high level of maintenance. So Dipty maintain, I guess, the road corridor, but council maintain all of the stone walls, the roses and the tree planting, and this has a high level of maintenance. The main, I guess, strip is about 330 metres long. We also looked at some of the other Barossa Valley entries like Lindok, Nuriupta and Angaston, and I guess the Barossa does have high scenic amenity, but a lot of this scenic amenity and the quality that comes from their, I guess, landscape is actually from the vineyards and the surrounding landscape itself. So the roads really aren't, that different. They're defined, they have line marking, but it's the, I guess, clean cut verges and vineyards to the side. Their tree planting would be, I think, more established and probably more uniform would also be the big difference with the Barossa. And it is little things like these which start to make the difference, and you get, I guess, a bit more of a sense of feel, and there's one sort of character for the Barossa. So we did have a look at those entries. We also had a look at Murray Bridge and Adelaide Road. Now, this one I think is quite relevant because it is one of their major entries, and it's about 1 kilometre long, so a really big stretch of verge, which used to be sort of mallee scrub. They have completely overhauled it, taken out a lot of trees and sort of cleaned it up. They have access to a recycled water scheme, so they've been able to do a lot of irrigated grass, and this has sort of been one of their priorities. So you can see that they've actually completed a few stages, and the image shows, I guess, how big areas of irrigated grass that's happening. But from what the feedback I've heard from people in the town, it's make a big difference to the feel that you come in to the Murray Bridge CBD. So this is a Adelaide City Council job now, Sir Donald Bradman Drive. And here they've done both the central median and the verges. And I guess if you have a look at the central median, it's sort of native plantings, gravel mulch and trees, as well with some artwork, which has been there for a while. They also have the benefit of irrigated parklands either side, but it has made a big difference during that central median as a bit of an entry and sort of gateway into the city. Then I guess your most recent project, so the Southern Gateway and the artwork, and I think Sam can elaborate further, but I understand that the planting is actually happening very soon. So that will, I think, make a big difference in helping that artwork to sort of soften and settle into the landscape. Sam, if you wanted to chip in.
Yeah, certainly. So the council did support a budget bid for that project. We have been undertaken for last year weed control, and we're just about, as of next week, to commence the planting of thousands of tube stock. I'll send an email that I'll send out like the members shortly in that regard, but effectively to establish a look and feel not too dissimilar with the photo, the image to the top left of the screen there, which was what was presented to the council at the time. So that project's imminent. I think the start date's 25th at this point.
And then I think Sam will talk further about the Eastlink Road, as well as the other project. But what we might do is we'll go through the survey results quickly so everyone can see. Now, we only had 4 respondents, so I think you're all going to be given, I guess, more time. And so we'd love to get any more feedback that everyone has time. We'll also take notes tonight, so feel free to chip in and give us some more direct feedback, because that would be greatly appreciated. I'll let James run through the survey.
Yeah, so what we, in terms of, we'll just quickly run through the survey questions and the responses that we have received today. So in terms of the most and sort of least attractive entries into the town of Gawler, the most attractive was Riggs Hill, which is coming in from the south, which is the last one that we went through just before. And also Main North Road, south from Cuddler. So coming through, we assume through passes the new sculpture along Main North Road. Carlton and Main North Road, there were no responses for those two, that's why they're grey. And then the least attractive, Main North Road South, was the least attractive from the responses. Barossa Valley, Ryde and Red Bank all were equal in terms of their ranking. What other towns are entries? So the only response in this one was Tanunda and other Barossa towns. So this is the Tanunda image here. But again, it'd be great to receive further, it doesn't necessarily need to be now, but further feedback on what other town entries should be an example and be aspirational for Gawler. What detracts most from the visual amenity of the existing entries? The importance here was unkept verges. That was by far the sort of most important. Rubbish, visual clutter, and insufficient maintenance. So no responses were received for lack of green, lack of tree planting, and unstructured planting. So really, it's about from the responses that we received, it's about having clean, upkept verges with no rubbish and reducing visual clutter. In respect to beautification, how important are each of the following? So again, similar to the last question, the responses are about general cleanliness, a little bit of additional planting in terms of understory and tree planting was desired, signage control, so reducing clutter. So we can see that the same things sort of coming through, but again, this is only from 4 responses. So the more of these received, I guess are more consistent than the information we're getting as well. And then ranking the order of entries in terms of priority for upgrade beautification. This one's a really important one in terms of the next steps and developing a hierarchy and a service standard for that hierarchy. This is a really important aspect to inform that. So this is, I suppose, in terms of priority, Main North Road South, North, Barossa Valley. So it's the similar in terms of the most trafficked entries. And again, the more responses for this will hopefully provide a bit more of a structure behind the next phase of this project.
So Alex, just to that point, I think maybe we open up for some discussion at that point before we go into some service standards and costs and that sort of thing. Where you hear back from the members in regards to, I suppose, what we've presented so far, and any particular commentary in that regard would be really useful. So I've got a Councillor Kosh, and feel free to use the hand symbol, and I'll chair on that basis. But I think initially we'll go through to Councillor Kosh, and then Councillor Hughes. So get your mute off, please, Councillor.
Okay, is that better?
Yes.
Okay, right. Just looking at some of those areas, the wide areas, and the fact that the dipped are maintained, is it possible to look at a strategy where we just get native grasses growing in those areas? Because if that's the level of maintenance that we can expect from Dipti, you know, a mixture of summer and winter grasses might give us the coverage that we want. And if we do if we can get the broadleafs down and get the grasses up, you know, that would give you a cover, and potentially you might get some of the native herbs and some of the understory plants and some of your little daisies, etc., coming in as well. So you actually start creating a grassland in those areas. Any comments?
Yes, certainly, Councillor Kosh. We're open to suggestions here, and the intent is to try and get a consensus position. Not tonight, so that's not the intent. But
I suppose the other thing there, those larger areas are probably suited to do some water harvesting, you know, like across the contours, and actually, you know, so it's more sustainable in the longer term. But you know, actually not. You know, for me, it's more you know, trying to get a habitat established in some of those broader areas that where you just naturally get where the maintenance might only just be slashing, you know, which you can actually slash out the annual weeds, for example. Anyway, that's me.
Yeah, my main concern was the maintenance, and looking at it was Main North Road South, and I didn't realise that Main North Road South was such a big area of Dipti land, and trying to get that cleaned up. You know, there's always papers and plastic and rubbish, you know, tyres, and seems, you know, the annual Clean Up Australia Day, it gets cleaned up then by volunteers being involved in that, and it doesn't seem to happen any other time. And often when they do get slashed, which happens irregularly, all the papers and everything else gets, you know, spread. So trying to, I think, keep Dipti to account, to maintain and up that level would be really good, and just controlling some of the weeds, some of the wild oats, and you know, the wild turnips, and some of the weeds that get unsightly. So someone with some really good plant ID skills, because we have had in Gawler some really nice grasslands, especially along Carlton Road, but different contractors have actually killed all the grasses at different times because they didn't realise they were actually low-growing, evergreen native grasses, and you know, then the wild oats and the turnips and everything else come in and take the place. So it's actually having some knowledge of species, and there is some really nice daisies and things like that. I think a town that wasn't, I didn't mention in my response was maybe Udunda, their entranceways, and actually in the town of Udunda, they've got some beautiful low-growing native gardens that, but I think there's volunteers that in the town that look after those sites, a bit like Tanunda and the Barossa. Those sites, there are big crews of volunteers that help council maintain those sites. And I think, yeah, especially in this climate, we're not after anything extravagant. It's just a matter of just keeping the high grass down and picking up the papers, and if there is regular cleanup days, I think there's people that will volunteer and wear a safety vest and do it. But yeah, on some occasions, the papers and plastic and bottles, I think it's really all of our entranceways. I was up tonight before the meeting in the council reserves on Riggs Hill, and there was a lot of papers and plastics in that reserve and on the roadside, and even there was a lot of deposit cans and bottles that people hadn't picked up. But it just sort of goes to show that yeah, our roadsides are unfortunately rubbish tips, and it sort of does then unfortunately reflect back on our town. So that's why I sort of wanted us to look at our entranceways, but also I think the main culprit is Dipty, working with Dipty to do some more with them. So thanks.
I might take the opportunity just to respond to a couple of those aspects. Certainly, as you've pointed out, Dipty's responsibilities in those areas is significant, and there certainly is a frustration at officer level with the standard. They've defined standards of which are required to be. They've set service levels which we believe are actually quite reasonable, but they're not holding their contractors, because there's within the town of Gawler there's actually 2 contractors that manage the service levels. They're quite big contractors that have metropolitan wide contracts. So there's 2 groups that manage Gawler, and effectively they're not being held to account, and that's a frustration we have, and something we want to solve through this process, potentially through a ministerial request to assist. But effectively, there's that aspect, and that's something that we're trying to resolve at officer level, but it's very difficult. The other aspect in regards to rubbish, it's managed a couple of ways. There's the ad hoc requests that we will get our staff, either through complaints from the community or through our own observations, will call through to Dipty, because they're responsible for actually collecting that as part of their verge side maintenance, and they do come out from time to time. But the council also has a program where it funds about $10,000 in its recurrent budget for the community offenders program. So within that, that's effectively our people that have required to do some community service. We fund a supervisor for a day, and effectively a bus will come out generally every fortnight if they can get a team together of offenders. But so generally every fortnight they come through and they'll collect papers on this particular entranceway and other entranceways, as well as service our Williston Cemetery. That has dropped off over the last month and a half through COVID, but we're hoping that they'll have that service back in early June, as per the latest advice that's been provided to us. So there's just some further context in that space. I will now go to Mayor Redmond, and then Councillor Tooley, Councillor Little, and then Councillor Goldstone.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, thanks for the discussion so far. It is quite a challenge, because a lot of this land is owned by Dipty and working with Dipty, so I'm quite keen to know what can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, so look, my views I've responded to the survey, and it's one of the most prominent complaints that I receive is the condition of the entranceways, and people aren't going to understand or care whether the entranceways are under the care of DIPTI or not. Unfortunately, they think council controls it all. We don't. I'm certainly not advocating that we take on the maintenance of all these areas. I think that would be unsustainable. But how do we actually improve, and how do we call DIPTI to account is probably the big question, but also potentially collaborate with them to improve the the quality of the entranceways that's financially sustainable. I'm not sure that we really need a Tanunda entranceway. That is certainly beautiful, but is that where we want to sit with Murray Bridge? Murray Bridge has that particular road in has some that native area that they've cleared, but they've also got artificial grass, which looks terrible, frankly, as you get closer to the town centre. And then they've got a remnant of the artificial grass going out on the Palmer Road. It's awful. So I wouldn't support artificial grass, but certainly native grasses, native butterfly attracting or bird attracting native species would be something that would be of great improvement to what we've got. I completely support removing the clutter of the signs. The signs are messy. Yeah, they don't seem to have any flow. They're randomly put up. Most of them put up by DIPTI, by the way. Yeah, so look, that's a challenge that, how do we manage that? But I think with an overarching coordinated standard, it might actually be useful when we're talking with DIPTI about how we can improve our entranceways. And, yeah, so that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll go to Councillor Tooley.
Thank you. The survey, I think I saw and I heard you say that there was only 4 respondents. Is that correct? Only four respondents?
That's correct, Councillor Tooley.
That's correct, yeah. Can you hear me okay? You can, okay. I suspect that of those 4 respondents, the majority may be councillors. That would be my guess. So what does that tell you in terms of our community interest in this? Obviously, the survey has been put out fairly widely, I'm guessing. Been running.
I might just on the survey was just purely for elected members, Councillor Tooley.
Oh, it's not broader than that at this point?
No. Sorry, at this point, and the intent was to communicate with the elected members. We weren't at this point envisaging a broader community consultation, but that might be something that comes out of this process.
Oh, I didn't realise that. That's a bit disappointing, because I would hate to think that we were going to base. Well, if I go back one step, your summary was based on the 4 respondents, and you were calling high responses and low responses and which were most important. You were doing that based on 4. As anyone would know, statistically, that's an incredibly small number. But even so, now that I realise that you're only surveying the elected members, I think that's a very flawed methodology. What you're telling us in this with those entrance points is that if we were to actually move on them, it would be a significant cost to do them justice and to make serious entrances. To do that based on just the view of elected members, of which only 4 of the 11 have responded, I think is very disappointing. But I think if we were to truly build a plan, we would need to have much, much broader input than just relying on us. That's just sort of looking inward, and we have vested interests. I don't think that's representative of the community. And I don't think any of us would be in a position to say that we've consulted widely and that we're representing the views of our community. So that would be my comment in terms of the survey. I think we need to broaden that and think very differently. Otherwise, we're going to spend an awful lot of time and money and effort now coming up with a plan that is purely the result of a handful of elected members. And that's not really doing justice to our community. Second thing I was going to say is that you gave us some examples of looking at towns in the Barossa. I'm wondering why you didn't take a look at a couple of our model developments in the form of Tea Tree Gully and the whole Golden Grove area, and then also Mawson Lakes. Both of those were relatively recently planned as major new satellite dormitory populations. They were fully planned, fully landscaped, and they do have significant tree scoping, entry statements. I would have thought that could have been a good and relevant input to perhaps balance just the looking at the Barossa towns. I don't know if you have any comment on that.
Thank you. Look, it's great to hear other towns that you want us to look at, because that's exactly the purpose of tonight, is to find out what towns you like. I know Barossa, Mawson Lakes entry quite well, and I guess that certainly has a very high level of, you know, capital expenditure up front, and the level of maintenance is quite high. So we can certainly balance that out in, I guess, contrast to the Barossa ones. Initial feedback was that the Barossa townships were the ones that we should really look at, and that they were the ones that you know, town of Gawler could aspire to. So that was, I guess, why we were leaning that way, to be honest.
Just in terms of the survey, you are right, Councillor Toole, in terms of the 4 being not really a significant representation, and that's why we're looking for feedback tonight in terms, and I really wanted to stop the presentation at this point just to get some different opinions from the members in terms of what beautification meant to them and what entries would be you know, aspirational for the town of Gawler. And certainly we can then, you know, synthesize all of that feedback and present something back as the next step in this journey. And whether that journey involves, you know, community consultation is something certainly the council can turn its mind to, and staff will consider moving forward in terms of, you know, how that potentially how that might work. So,
if I could just respond then, Sam. One area where I think that I feel we're out of touch is that the majority of the councillors, if you ask them, they would be inclined to talk almost exclusively about natives. You hear it all the time. Native grasses, native trees, native. My fear in that is that if we just simply listen to that only, and we don't listen to the broader community, and we were to use that as the basis for our planning, then I think we wouldn't be tapping into what the community want. And I don't think it's our place to dictate as strongly as we often do. And I'll give you a couple of examples. If you come down Lyndock Road, you took that as one of the major entrances that comes in. It comes past the Wheatsheaf Inn, you then rise up to Cheek Avenue, you then head in. If you've driven along there recently, probably about, the most recent was 3 weeks ago, the arborists were in the section from Cheek Avenue down in towards the town. They planted native trees. Now those native trees are so hacked, they're distorted, they're now getting diseased. The same happened out the front of my house. I had a row of native trees. Because they were pruned so heavily, they eventually got diseased, and we replaced them. We replaced them with other species. And if you were to ask people, I'm pretty sure a lot of people will have a leaning towards the Manchurian pears, the plane trees. You talked about Sir Dradman Drive. You have a look at that. that's plane trees, advanced plane trees all along there. When they redid North Terrace and they took out the ash trees, they put in advanced plane trees. They took off instantly. If you go through the Golden Grove area, almost all of the landscaping in the treescaping is non-native trees. Now, I've said this many times before, native trees have their place, most definitely, but they're not, in my view, an ideal street tree in most instances. We've had the argument about, well, these European trees drop their leaves. Gum trees drop their leaves continually. I live right next door to the Cheek Avenue Cemetery. There is a massive gum tree right on my boundary. It hovers over my shed. It continually drops leaves all year. No, I love the tree, happy with it, not going to complain about it. My own trees, I've virtually removed all of my natives and I have non-natives. Yes, they drop leaves, and over about a 2 or 3 week period, I vacuum them up, I mow them up, and then they're gone. So I don't think the dropping of the leaves is an issue. And certainly, if you go along the parade in Norwood, and a lot of those areas there, I think, Sam, you might live up that way. You know, some of those beautiful avenues in that area near the Norwood Parade, a lot of artwork, a lot of sculpture, and predominantly non-native trees. So I think we've got to balance this, and be careful, I hope, that we're not going to be building a large plan for entrance statements based on, one, a very small group of people, and a group of people who have an extreme bias for natives. And if we were to do that, then I just don't think we'd be in touch with the broader community. And that's who we represent. We represent the broader community. So I hope that we won't be going too far ahead before we will start to actually canvass what our community really wants. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tooley. I'll go to Councillor Little and then Councillor Goldstone and Councillor Fraser.
Yeah, I'm listening to the debate. I think a lot of it gets down to education. To clarify what Councillor Tooley says, yeah, the feedback I get from my locals in my part of Gawler is that they want something green coming in. When I mentioned sometimes that we're using natural grasses, they say, but they're not green. And I said, well, that's what they are. They want something on the line, but people bring up the town of Strathalbyn to me, and also Victor Harbour. So I went and had a look, about a few looks. I think 80% of me is leaning towards Councillor Tooley says, about 20% towards what Councillor Kosh and Councillor Hughes said. We need a mixture of both. I think it gets down to education, but I think we need to do a broader survey of what people want. And I don't think they want natural grasses and dirt looking at them when they come into towns. And most of them, as what the Mayor says, do not understand that we don't control our entrances. And that's the hardest thing I have trying to get across to people. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Councillor Little. I'll go to Councillor Goldstone.
Okay. Yeah, I guess when I introduced this to council, as I mentioned back then, it was as a consequence of talking to people during the campaign period leading up to the elections, and most of the comments related to the general cleanliness of Gawler, issues such as, you know, street cleaning, gutter cleaning, nature strip maintenance, picking up the rubbish, frequency of line marking, all these sort of things that generally improve the appearance of Gawler. The issue of entry statements did come up, but I think we need to be mindful that we're not, in my mind, this project's about coming up with costed prioritised strategies to improve the overall appearance of Gawler. Admittedly, there would be a focus on the main entries into Gawler, but in my mind, it's not about entry statements. It's about a whole raft of things that we could do to improve the physical appearance of the town. For example, if we upgrade the entrance, the southern entrance of the town, which does need to be done, then you ignore Adelaide Road up to the new main street of, Gawler, which is beautiful. You're going to have this gap in between because you've just got to drive along and look at things like, faded line marking, rubbish on the side of the roads, this sort of thing. And these are the things that people were raising with me when I was out about chatting to them. I think most of them will come up as mentioned before in the service side of things. Things like, the Overway Bridge as you enter from Ryde Street. The whole Overway Bridge Road and that bridge itself is just atrocious when you drive in. There's no footpaths, the fencing's falling down and rusted. These are the things that people see when they're coming into the town. And I realise there's this Dipty Council sort of issue, but like the Mayor said, people don't worry about that. As far as they're concerned, it's council, and we need to look at it somehow. Like I said, most of the things that were raised with me, I think will come up under the service issues side of things, but overall, it's just this issue of general cleanliness and trying to improve the appearance of the town. And I guess you've got to start somewhere, but the southern entrance as you come into town, it doesn't set a good example for people coming into the town. So yeah, I think most of the issues I'll have, Sam, will be to do with service and so forth. But I just don't want us to lose focus that it's not about designing entry statements. It's about, sure enough, it's about the entrances into Gawler as perhaps as a priority, but it's about all these things, things like street sweeping. You have a look at Adelaide Road footpaths, even the new ones, they're just covered in leaf litter now, and people try to push prams and that down and they can't get there. So these are the sort of things when it comes back to maintenance. And I know there's a cost associated with that, but be interested to hear what the discussion is on the service issue side of things. So thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Goldstone. And certainly, I think it's part of, we haven't brought it into this conversation tonight because we wanted to hear from the members in regards to those services as well. But as part of the report that we present to Council in terms of that next step will be also put on the table what those service levels are and potentially, what are the opportunities in that regard that Council may wish to take up, and we'll have some dollars associated with that. So there will be that opportunity. I suppose that's what Alex is bringing up. There has been a bit of work done already in terms of identifying sort of broad costs. Now, just looking at the numbers in regards to on the screen there, that just broadly breaks it up into various categories and what those costs are for various tasks and frequencies, and how it will be funded, and also who's responsible. So it's certainly an easy task once we know the change in service level being requested, in terms of being able to actually put some dollars behind that. And it's not out of reason for council to potentially consider working with Dipty in regards to a lifting of service levels, whether that's a plea to government to increase the service level provision, or at least maintain it in accordance with their own service levels. I think the starting point, but certainly the ability to increase service levels and potentially pay for that. And some councils do that. And there are some councils that have taken on areas, which is quite problematic and not something that we as staff necessarily be advocating for. But there might be opportunities to augment existing contracts to increase the service level provision for the town of Gawler and actually get a better outcome. So that's another option as well. I will go to, before we move on to services and just talk through that spreadsheet a bit further potentially, I've got Councillor Fraser, who's the last standing councillor with a hand up, so waiting patiently. So over to you, Councillor Fraser.
Just talking about, can you hear me? Yes, okay, because I've disappeared, that's all. Just talking about Golden Grove, and I'm assuming Mawson Lakes is the same. it was actually developed by the developer. And if I remember rightly, with Golden Grove, after the council, Tea Tree Gully Council took it over, there was a huge outcry about how much it was costing. So I think a lot of it has been altered since it was first done because of the cost to council. So you have to think about maintenance. It might look great, but it's got to be maintained. And that's the problem we have with our developers all the time, with our parks and things, trying to keep it at a cost level for us to maintain. When you go out to the northern bypass, especially if you go Angle Vale Way or where they've got the roundabouts and coming back onto the freeway, they've got native shrubs, I suppose they are, more than grasses, and they're quite nice. And I think that some of our verges coming into our town are quite wide. So, you know, we could plant things like that, and they're all different colours, different times of the year, they're different colours. So I think, you know, and that I'm assuming that they're water wise, so they would be easy to maintain like that. So, but yeah. Can you hear me?
Certainly, Councillor Fraser. Yep, that was comes through
okay.
loud and clear. We just can't see you, unfortunately.
No, I've disappeared. That's okay. I don't like looking at myself anyway.
So is there any, I can't see any other questions. If that's the case, there's certainly opportunities throughout the rest of the presentation to ask questions. So feel free to join and raise a hand throughout the course. Probably at this point, maybe we'll just go through your service schedule there, Alex, and then I'll cut over to this, a couple other little presentations as it relates to Gawler East Link Road and some of the outcomes that are being presented as part of that project, because I think it's important that we talk about that tonight. So just over to you, Alex.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. So this is what we're preparing, I guess, with Paul and his team as well, is actually starting to work out how much things cost and, you know, whether it's an ongoing service thing or whether it be a capital upgrade. So we are getting down to, for example, you know, how much it costs to mow lawn per hour, how much does street sweeping cost, and whether it's, you know, a square metre rate or hours. Where does this funding come from, and then who's responsible as well? Because some things, for example, are outsourced, like treating trees for diseases as well. So we're starting to get a really good spreadsheet, which you guys can have a look through, and everything from removing leaf litter to water trucks as well. And I guess all these, and I guess it starts to show the bigger picture of what's actually involved in the upkeep and maintenance of a town, and starts to give an idea of, yeah, I guess the scale of it. And then what we can start to do is, even if we've identified some priority areas, we could have a look at, all right, this is 2,000 square metres of verge. What does that actually mean if we want to do native grasses or irrigated lawn here? So we can actually start to compare the two, and have a look at those things. And, you know, if we're not planting natives, right, do we need to then look at irrigation as well? What does the irrigation cost? How much is that going to be per year as well? So it's the upfront cost and the ongoing costs as well that we're starting to look at. So I think this is actually going to be really helpful in hopefully our discussions, and actually understanding what's involved when we start to talk about a better, I guess, look and feel of the town of Gawler. Last slide I have, Sam, really is, I guess, the, you know, the next steps. And I think from this, and whether we do go out to community consultation, I guess, I mean, that's what we need to discuss. But we really want to define the hierarchy as well. And I understand it is about all of Gawler, but it would be good to understand the hierarchy and whether that is, it doesn't have to be entries, but what do we see as priorities really? And then from that, we can start to define service standards as well. And then if needed, then we can identify the opportunities for major works and upgrades. So separate to service standards, where do we actually see, all right, we want to actually invest in a proper project here. And I think that's that sort of multi-prong approach that we're really looking for, this beautification plan. but we really need everyone's feedback. And I think, yeah, I guess we'll discuss about going out to the broader community as well. Back to you, Sam.
Thank you, Alex. Members, I might just, Alex, I'll get you to stop sharing your screen and I'll just work through another presentation, and apologies, there's a bit in this one as well, as it relates to the link road. And it's something that we'd certainly look to present to the June council meeting, but there's been some documentation land more recently. It's still draft and there's still staff comments that are going backwards and forwards, but I certainly thought it was important to share this tonight with you, just to give you a sense on that. The link road is going to be a bit of a game changer in terms of opportunities and landscaping. So I'll just bring this screen up if you bear with me. I'm hoping that you can see that. I'll just go to slideshow from the beginning. So can members see that? Yep, thumbs up. Great, thanks, Councillor Little. I'm just setting my screen up. Okay, so just talk you through the link road in terms of the landscape through there. In terms of we'll get to this, but the front page here just depicts a cross section of the road and the end aim is what we're hoping to get out of the 3.5 kilometres of roadway from Potts Road through to Cowton Road. It does rely on a portion of it, the last K or so, for Springwood to come on board, but that's certainly the element in council's control. We're looking to plant those trees in the coming months, well ahead of the opening at this point on the 17th of August. So that's where it's currently trending with respect to an opening of that road. Just see if it's not working. Sorry, members. There we go. So I'll talk through landscaping of various nodes along the road. In terms of the program, as I said, the link road is actually scheduled at this point to be open at the mid-August, depending on weather, but that's currently allowing for another 25 days of wet weather. So there's a bit of float in that. In terms of other sections, I know as of this week, I think it might have been today, Potts Road's open to two-way traffic. The roundabouts along One Tree Hill Road and Cowton Road are actually going to be opened up this week to two-way traffic, which is going to be quite pleasing to some members of our community, being a bit frustrated with the traffic lights. And the works along Maynooth Road over the course of the next 3 weeks are certainly, in terms of night works that will be occurring, been a bit set back by, I think, rain that's coming in the next week or two, the next few days, which might set things back, but effectively by, early to mid-June, Maynooth Road should be all tidied up and effectively operating at its intended capacity, and that'll take a lot of heat out of the community in regards to traffic, but it's not about traffic, it's about landscaping. So there are nodes of landscaping that'll be delivered as part of the project. DIPTI have a limited budget and they've actually made it public more recently. The minister came out and said that the project is now $68 million. And that I wasn't able to publicly reveal that, but it's gone from $55 million to $68 million and it's still under some duress. So within the project budget, there is an allocation for landscaping and it's a reasonable allocation, and we're currently waiting for DIPTI to finalise and advise us what will be delivered. But tonight I'll give you an update from what we believe will be delivered and what won't be delivered in terms of some aspects for council to fund, for council to deliver through the deferred infrastructure separate rate in the future. So they'll just give you some images here of the link road as it's coming together. So effectively north of Potts Road, this is depicting what the landscape broadly would look like. Just to the left is a Selway, bit of geofabric in this area, next to the Selway residents have been quite vocal. They'll be planted out specifically. But broadly, those batters would be hydroseeded with your native grasses per se. So it'll be a good demonstration to see exactly how that does look in practice on sort of a broad scale in what should be really optimum growing environment with respect to topsoil. So that's that will be a real demonstration of that native grasses. That's kilometres of that along the link road. This is another view a bit further along from One Tree Hill Road.
Sam, I think your screen's frozen. We're seeing the first page.
Oh, can you not see any of those pages?
No, I can't, mate. I'm stuck on the very first page, Sam.
Ah. All right, what I'll do, I might stop the share and start it again and see if that. It's a large file, so that, bear with me, that could be part of the reason. Okay, we'll try again. Can you see the Glur program? That no. Okay. Might be the size of this file. All right, maybe that's not going to work. So rather than waste more time in that regard, what I'll talk to the intent, and what I'll do is upload the presentation through to the Elected Member Hub. You'll see tonight we've uploaded some other. There are some other elements which I'll talk to you shortly, but I'll upload this to the hub, and then it'll give members a chance to review that information per se in terms of what we delivered. But effectively, there's going to be landscaping. There's 3 roundabouts that will be delivered on the link road: Cowton Road, One Tree Hill Road, and Potts Road. Those roundabouts will be landscaped. Cowton Road is the one that's a little bit in the air because of Springwood's seeking to have some involvement in that space. So I've just, that one's a bit in the air, but the other 2 will be landscaped. And there'll be significant landscaping also along Maynolth Road in front of the Homemaker Centre and also Gawler Green. And Alex had a bit of a image of the Gawler Green landscape in his presentation as well. So that these nodes will actually add to the look and feel of Gawler, particularly on the entry through Adelaide, Maynolth Road and along that eastern bypass. So apologies, I can't show you that further tonight, but those works are due to be completed in the coming months, and it's certainly something I want to get to council just to review that information and make sure it's across what's being delivered in that space. In terms of other projects that have been done in the past, it's worthwhile noting that in 2018 there was a project that the council did seek to consider, sought to fund the Red Banks Road upgrade and in the internal of the roundabout. Unfortunately, that funding was actually pulled by the council shortly into the financial year, and that project never actually eventuated. But there is a design of the Red Banks Road roundabout and what it could look like, with respect to increased amenity within the call it the annulus or the circle of the roundabout within the interior of the roundabout. So that was certainly presented to council, and there is also, that's currently uploaded to the hub for information, as well as some earlier work that was undertaken on the southern entry, which from the information we've received to date is one of the more important entries. Some other options and I suppose very early concepts of what that could look like, and that's been uploaded up to the Elected Member Hub as well for your further information and review. And these are reports that we will look to collate even as appendices into the broader report that we bring back on beautification. So it's in a one-stop shop per se of these various studies that have been done over time. So I think at that point I might go back to Alex. I think we're almost at the end of the presentation. Sorry, Madam Mayor, got a question? Sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Hub has documents, but there's nothing behind the documents. One's completely blank. The PowerPoint only has the page and nothing else. And the 2018 council reports are there either. So I think it'd be good to have those complete documents put up. The Redbanks Road concept is there, but the southern entranceway concept is not there.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll look into that. I'm sorry, I think there's a problem with the size of the files that we've actually created, and there might be some problems that are generating in that regard, but we'll sort this out tomorrow, so apologies about that. In terms of, any more questions? So in terms of the next steps from here, it's really, I think we'd like to hear, give members more of an opportunity to provide input, and we certainly think it's certainly valuable to collect as much as we can prior to trying to synthesize that. So we're certainly open to feedback being provided through the course of this week, over the weekend. And if there's any further feedback from next week, we'll start collating our summary of your collective views, and then in terms of proposing a way forward. In the meantime, we'll have these documents uploaded and give you a better sense of what's been already undertaken or what will be undertaken in the near future. And that's probably it, arriving towards the end of the presentation at this point. Alex, there's nothing else from your perspective?
No, I think that's it. The only one that I did want to clarify was that I'm not advocating for AstroTurf. And I've actually been helping Murray Bridge Council out in removing the AstroTurf and coming up with a plan for native planting to take that, because they've had a lot of backlash from that, from the AstroTurf as well. I think everyone's sort of moved on from fake green, thankfully. And so I think that's a bit of a bonus.
So, Madam Mayor, did you have a question?
Can I add something to that? There's a really good PIRSA native garden centre just next to Murray Bridge, and their plantings are outstanding. And then you go to Murray Bridge, and yeah, they seem, it doesn't seem to translate, but yeah, you couldn't go much further than that garden centre. It's unbelievable, just beautiful what they've done there.
Okay, so a last call for questions. No, on that basis, I think we can, oh, sorry, Councillor Fraser. I'll help you unmute.
Okay, thank you. Just talking about beautification of the town, I'd still like to see some pots in the main street with, I don't know, geranium, something with flowers in it, but you either have to have volunteers to maintain it, or have the shopkeepers that, not have it outside every shop, obviously, but have it, for the shopkeepers to actually maintain it. And also if we can get the shopkeepers to maintain the fronts of their properties, that would be really good. Some of them, I know it's hard times and some of them are closed down, but they could come in, every few days and just sweep their footpath. It would be really nice if they did that, but they don't seem to have any interest. They think it's all up to council, unfortunately. And I don't know how you get that mindset around them that it's actually their businesses that are looking awful. So, but I would like to see some pots in the main street. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Well, like I said, we've got to the end of the week, early next week. If you could provide your comments, we'll start synthesising this all for Monday, and we'll look to present something back to you at hopefully the August IES. So thank you everyone for your time. Apologies about some of the technical glitches at the beginning and at the end, and we'll try and resolve that and get that information through to you. Okay, good evening.